Welcome to today's session on standards and specification. This is the fourth part of session 12, and the name of the subject is fashion material and production management for merchandisers. So far we have talked about standards. Now, the second part is the specifications. Now, specifications are details, the details for every product, every product. A white T-shirt would have different specification. A blue T-shirt would have different specification. So every new product will have a new specification, and specification is details and mostly numerical. Specifications are a precise statement of a set of requirements to be satisfied by the product or service. I give you an order of white shirt. I'll give you the specification. This is the fabric, this is the fiber, this is the count, construction, GSM, this is the color fastness, the tensile strength. These are the physical and chemical requirements, and the quantity, the seams and stitches, all the details. These are the specifications. And the requirements are non-negotiable. Whatever I have specified, you cannot change anything in this. So when you are giving specification, you are actually giving specific terms and numerical values with measurement units to the vendor who is supposed to make the product for you. So one such example is, if you want very sturdy fabric, you say that I want good abrasion resistance, but you don't say good abrasion resistance. You say I want abrasion resistance in which the fabric should not show any hole after 350 cycles. Before 350 cycles, if there is any hole visible, then I'm not going to accept the fabric. So this is specifying that this is the abrasion level I want. Minimum 350 cycles, no holes. Now, there are two important elements of expectation. One is the minimums and one is the tolerances. Now, minimums are when you want performance, especially related to safety or health. And tolerances is where, let's say you give a measurement that I want a belt of 100 centimeter. You know that, when you make the belt, after ironing, a little bit of stretching here and there, that 100 centimeter will become 101 centimeter. So you will have to give that tolerance. It is not possible to make exact 100 centimeter length belt, or for that matter any garment with perfect measurements. It is not possible. So you'll have to give some tolerance. So minimums and tolerances are two important elements of expectations. Now let's say you're talking about pilling or dimensional stability, color fastness, measurements, GSM, count, construction, etc. Now when you talk about pilling, you give minimum. Minimum, these many cycles, I shouldn't be able to see any pilling. Dimensional stability, you don't give a minimum, you say plus minus 5%. You are giving me woven fabric. After I wash the woven fabric, there should not be a shrinkage more than 5% and there should not be an elongation more than 5%. So in case of dimensional stability, you give a tolerance of plus minus 5%. In case of color fastness, you don't give tolerances, you give minimum. Minimum, I want a color fastness of 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. You don't say, if you say I want a color fastness of 4, you don't give a tolerance of plus minus 5%. You want a minimum 3 or a 4. If you give measurements, you give tolerance, because we know that measurements go up and down. So that's why you give the tolerance. Same for the GSM, grams per square meter. When you buy fabric, when you get the fabric, you take different lengths of fabric from different thun. You take the GSM will vary. Every length of fabric has a different GSM, slightly different GSM. So in case of GSM, you give tolerance, plus minus. So if you want 100 GSM, you give a tolerance of plus minus 2%. So which means a GSM of 98 to 102 will be acceptable. but the GSM should not be less than 98 and should not be more than 102. In case of count and in case of construction also, we give tolerances. Of course, vendors should be warned if the product drifts too far from the specs too often. So you're giving the tolerances. That doesn't mean that the vendor should never give you perfect measurements. There are times when the measurements are perfect also. But if the vendor, because you have given a tolerance, the vendor gives you such measurements which are always away, which are always far from your specification, then you should warn the vendor that you can't be giving me wrong measurements or measurements within the tolerance. You also have to give me some perfect measurements also. Yeah, not all specifications have tolerances. Like if you talk about the measurement of the collar of a formal shirt, the collar is the most critical part of the shirt. It cannot be crooked even by 1%. The measurement of the collar cannot change even by 1%. The measurements have to be perfect. There is zero tolerance. Sleeve length, shirt length, you may have tolerances, but collar measurements, zero tolerance. So not every specification will have tolerance. Finally, the procedure, the test method, or the process must be identified in detail in spec sheet. So when you are giving the specifications, you will also tell the procedure, the test method, or the process. Now, if you are giving the measurement of a shirt, let's say, then you also have to show in your specification sheet as to how will the measurement be done. If you say the shirt length, from which point to which point the measurement will be taken, that has to be explained in the specification sheet. So whatever you want, whatever you are specifying, you also have to tell the vendor what will be the procedure or the test method or the process that will be used to check whether the specification is correct or not. Now there are different types of specs. One is your open spec and one is the closed spec. Now this is very important when we are talking about government tenders. Open spec and closed spec are used in different situations. After we have understood what is open and closed spec, it will make more sense to you. Now open spec allows for consideration of multiple vendors, meaning to say that you as a buyer of a brand or you as a government, when you are asking for a white shirt, I want a white shirt, cotton shirt. There are many vendors who can, apply and who can participate in the tender. But if you say, I only want Wrangler white shirt, in that case, only Wrangler will be able to participate. That's a basic example here. Now, open spec allows for consideration of multiple vendors, which means many vendors can participate in this. It describes the character and or performance desired in the product. So you are not defining the product, you are only saying that I want a white shirt which has this character and this performance is required. So you don't specify the brand or you don't say that it has to have Lycra and things like that. You say you want a stretchable white t-shirt. You don't say I want a t-shirt which has Lycra in it. And open spec describes what is wanted. So you say what is wanted. You don't say what brand is wanted. So open spec describes what is wanted and the vendor is free to supply. The vendor can give you, so vendor is giving you a solution. Vendor is not giving you a brand. So that is how we understand open spec. And open spec is used when products must meet certain required characteristics. So our requirements are understood. We need certain characteristics and we give open specs. We want this product with this performance and this character. It can be any brand, whatever, as long as it meets the required characteristics. So one such example is when you ask for 100% polyester, tri-lobal, cross-section, 2 denier, delustered and crimped. So this is an open spec. Now we'll see what is a closed spec. Open spec, so what we are saying here is I want 100% polyester, but the cross section should be tri-lobal. Anyone can make tri-lobal cross section, and the thickness of the fineness of the yarn is 2 denier. It is delustered, meaning to say it has been finished in such a way that it does not shine, and it has been crimped. It has a wavy structure. So this is an open spec. Now let's see what is a closed spec. Then it will be fairly evident what is the difference between open spec and closed spec. Now closed spec or closed specification, it specifies exact material, the component or the product by the manufacturer, including the style number and the trade name. So this is absolutely closed. So last time we said we want 100% polyester, tri-lobal, 2 denier, delustered, crimped. Here we are saying I want Dacron polyester. Now Dacron is a trademark and by a particular buyer. It belongs to, that this trademark belongs to a particular buyer. Now, when you are asking Dacron polyester, it means anyone who is a wholesaler or a distributor of Dacron, only that person will be able to participate in this. You have actually specified the name of the manufacturer. Second example is Lycra. Lycra is spandex, but Lycra is the brand name of spandex which has been developed by DuPont. Third, you don't say I want a 1.5 ton AC. You are saying I want Voltas. So in that case, vendors who are selling other air conditioners, they cannot participate. Only those people can participate, or the company itself, Tata Voltas can participate, or the dealer distributor of Voltas can participate. This is what we mean by closed spec. Now, closed specs are used for production purposes, pricing, and for items that must incorporate specific materials. So, if your buyer says, I want a cotton Lycra t-shirt, in that case, you are going to talk to the fabric supplier and you want to say that, listen, I need cotton Lycra knitted fabric. You're not going to say, I want stretch cotton fabric. You say cotton Lycra fabric, because your client has asked for cotton Lycra only. Also, in case of pricing, because if the pricing is fixed, then you will be using closed spec in order to achieve that price. And for items that must incorporate specific materials, so just in case, let's say you are a software company and you want particular servers with certain processing speeds, you might say that I want servers with Intel processor with this particular configuration. So you are giving exact configuration and you are also giving the name of the brand name of the processor. So this is the case of using closed spec. And there are more types of specs. Target spec. Now this relates to product type or price point or target group needs and expectation. So if you say that I want denims for mining engineers or mining workmen, or if you say I want lab coat for I want lab coats for people who are working in the chemistry labs. So the lab coat for a person working in the chemistry lab is different, and a lab coat worn by, let's say, a doctor in a hospital is different. So you are specifying that in which situation, which person is going to wear this lab coat, and accordingly, I need the product and the price. And this may be stated in vague terms or general aspects or general terms, like lab coat for chemistry lab. So it can be, there are different types of materials which can be used to make lab coats. So one such example is we provide high fashion upscale furnishings for the discriminating consumer. So you're not saying the consumer as a doctor or lawyers or politicians, etc. You're just saying discriminating consumer, a consumer who has taste, who can discriminate, who is evolved, who has a better understanding. And we provide high fashion, which means something which looks very contemporary, which looks very, which looks very trendy. And upscale furnishing is something which is on the expensive side. So this is, our target spec, which is, somewhat rounded, vague, and generalized kinds. Another example is "Isse sasta aur acha kahin nahi." Now, this was the previous tagline of Big Bazaar. Fashion Big Bazaar. "Isse sasta aur acha kahin nahi." So when you say this, people understand that you are a mass market brand, and therefore you will require products at cheaper prices, and therefore the raw material also will have to be in the economy range. Then we have functional specs. It relates to the performance requirements. So when we say performance requirement, let's say I want mountaineering shoes. So these are functional specs. So mountaineering shoes which can withstand extreme temperatures like minus 25 degrees centigrade and plus 52 degrees centigrade, etc., etc. So these are functional specs. Then we have legal and regulatory specs. Now, legal and regulatory specs are mandatory. These are legal and they must be met. So you talk about helmets, so it has to have that crash test. So the impact strength has to be of certain level. Same for the automobiles, when they have to pass the impact test. Then in case of textile and clothing, if you see kids wear or mattresses, they have to pass the flammability test. Now, that is the legal and regulatory specs. It has been provided by law. The specs have been provided. You have to follow that. Then another category is product specs. Now, product specs are, especially in case of garments, when you're ordering garments, you have to give the seam and stitch type. You have to give what machine will be used for each operation, whether it's going to be single needle lock stitch or overlock or chain stitch or whatever. So you have to give the seam and stitch type. Then you have to also say which machine will be used, and you also have to specify other quality aspects. Quality aspects like consistent stitches, even stitches, and things like that. Then we have material spec, characteristics of each material with functional or performance aspects, how the material reacts to various conditions of use. So material spec is something like, let's say, if you are talking about swimwear, people swim in the swimming pool or maybe in the rivers or in the oceans. Now, river water is fresh water, does not have salt or chlorine. But if you talk about ocean or sea, it is salt water. And if you talk about water in the swimming pool, it has chlorine water. So if you talk about swimming suits or swimming material, those material have to have resistance to salt and to chlorine. So that is the material spec. Characteristics of each material with functional or performance aspect. Now the functional aspect is it has to withstand the chlorine as well as the salt. The color should not fade. The fabric should not get weak upon very less number of usage. Then we have process spec. A process spec is I want something, but it has to be done like this. How? Yeah. So the entire production process will be clearly explained. So let's say you want, let's say, rice. So the process spec is you say that rice has to be cleaned. Then it has to be, so the rice has to be cleaned in cold water for 4 times. 5th time when it is being cleaned, the water should not look milky. Once the rice has been cleaned, then it has to be dipped in drinking water for half an hour. Then it has to be steamed, or then it has to be cooked in a open vessel or in a cooker. So these are process spec, the entire production process. The moment you change the production process, the taste of the rice would change, and the quality of the way it fluffs up would change. Then we have inspection spec. Now in inspection spec, you clearly specify that this is how we are going to inspect. We are going to use AQL 1 or 2.5 or 4 or 6 or 10. We are going to be very strict. It does not mean anything. You say we are going to use AQL 1, which is the strictest. Now if you are, let's say, working for a very cheap brand, and that cheap brand says that we are going to do the inspection at AQL level 1, you have to object. That come on, you are not paying so much, so then your inspection level cannot be so strict. Otherwise, you will have to increase the price. So that is the significance of inspection spec. If you are taking an order, you should always ask, sir, ma'am, at what level are you going to check or inspect the garment? At what level? AQL 1, 2.5, 4, 6, 10. Accordingly, you are going to quote the prices. And accordingly, you will, and if they want very strict quality and your factory cannot give that quality, you will have to simply deny. You will have to simply say, no, we will not be able to give you this quality because your inspection is very, very strict. So that's why it's important to take the inspection specification from the client. Some of the buyers would tell you that we do initial inspection, we do inline, we do mid, we do pre-final, we do final inspection. Some say that we'll just do an initial inspection and then we'll do a final inspection. So someone who is only doing initial and final inspection is going to be less bothering. But someone who does 10 types of inspections is going to bother you a lot, and is going to hamper the production process. So accordingly, you are going to give the prices to the client. And then we have the test specification, describes how to evaluate the process or the product before, during, or after production. So inspection will be done at what level? Is it going to be very strict or is it going to be relaxed? That is inspection spec. But test spec is how are we going to measure? How are we going to evaluate the process or the product before, during, or after the production? Now, before the production, the materials are evaluated. How will it be evaluated? Like JCPenney's 4-point system. Then during the production, so when the production is happening, then the processes will be inspected, will be evaluated. So every machine, whatever operations are being done, that will be evaluated, whether it is being done correctly or not. And last but not the least, after the production has been done, then the performance will be checked. Now garment has been stitched, it is ready. Now what are we going to evaluate? The performance of the garment. So the garment will now be sent to the lab, where the dimensional stability, the seam strength, all those details will be checked, and the whatever has been specified, that the seam strength should be at least 50 kilos, so that has to be fulfilled by your garment in the lab test. Then we have acceptance spec. Now this describes the frequency or the type and the locational defects that will or will not be acceptable in the finished product. Now in the acceptance spec, you say that out of 100 garments, if there are only 3 garments which have defects, we will accept it. But if more than 3 garments have defects, we will not accept it. That is acceptance spec. Second, type and location of defect. Type of defect, we will not accept any holes. We will accept small stains, but only if it is, let's say, inside the pocket. If it is inside, is not visible outside, or if it is a small stain, at the armpit or at the hem of the shirt, which will actually be tucked inside the trouser, so it will not be visible. So the type and location of defect will also be included in the acceptance specification. So you tell that what will be acceptable and what will not be acceptable in terms of frequency, in terms of type, and the location of the defects. Anything which is very visible, there you will not be ready to accept any kind of defect. But in those areas which are not visible at all, you might be ready to take some knots or some small stains or some structural discrepancy if it is not visible when a person is wearing the garment. Now, acceptance spec relates to the appearance, performance, labeling, packaging. So, packaging has to be like this, labeling has to be done in this manner. These are the labels, these are the positioning of the labels, the performance, and the appearance. The appearance, it should look good. It should look. The overall look should match with the original look that was given to the manufacturer, and then the sleeves should look balanced, the garment should look balanced, it should not be tilted in one direction, etc., etc. So those are the things which has to be included in the acceptance spec. So example is the underside of the collar. So inside the collar, below the collar, a person may be a brand may be ready to take small stains and things like that under the arm. But A zone, which is very close to the face and which is highly visible, in A zone, no tolerance. In B and C, there will be some tolerance. In C, there will be more tolerance. All of these will fall under your acceptance spec. Now we are going to talk about the list of unacceptable defects for a simple product, which is a towel, which all of us use for the purpose of drying ourselves after we have taken a bath, or let's say we are sweaty and we just want to remove the excess sweat from our body, from our face. The product that we use, we call it a towel. So now we want to take a look at the list of unacceptable defects for a towel. Now, any hole or tear in the fabric is an absolute no-no. It's a defective piece. It's a damaged piece. So why would anyone accept it? Now, a towel which has any spots or stain or soil. Soil is dirt. Stain is, let's say, color of some other material has gone, has come onto this towel. Any spot is the towel itself has, it has got discolored or something like that. So these are again something which are not acceptable. We also know as consumers, we will not buy such towels. Any irregularities of yarn or fabric structure that could result in a hole or product return. So if there is, certain yarns are missing, or there is too much of yarn in a particular section and it looks ugly. So in those cases, or if the fabric structure looks a little, deformed, you wouldn't want to buy it, you'd return it. And the fabric must conform to stated performance requirement. Now, what is a towel supposed to do? It is supposed to dry off the excess water or sweat from the surface of your skin. That's its job. If it is not able to absorb, then it's not a towel. And it should, let's say, dry fast. If it does not dry fast, it will start smelling. Okay, when we buy a towel, so it is stitched from all the four sides. So the stitching must be uniform. It should be even, and you should conform to the product specification. Now, uniform, all the stitches look the same. Even, the stitch lengths are the same. The tension of the stitch is the same. And conform to the product specification. So you have stitched it. Now the type of seam and the type of stitch which has been specified, it should have been followed. Otherwise, you will not take that towel. So as let's say a brand, you have placed an order of 1,000 towels. You will not accept if the vendor has not followed the measurement and the product specification in terms of the construction of the towel. If the label is incorrect, or let's say the label is incorrect in terms of information, or it has been placed at the wrong place. Information, it is a cotton towel and you know, someone places a viscose towel, something like that. That's a wrong label. Or if it has to be placed in some corner, from let's say 3 centimeters from the longer on the longer side in the corner, if it is not placed correctly, it's a defect. And of course, if you say that I want a white towel or a off-white towel or a deep blue towel, the color should match the standard that you have given. Otherwise, why would you accept the towel?